Is Broncos quarterback Bo Nix potentially headed for a sophomore slump? Should the Denver Nuggets feel satisfied with a split in the first two games against Oklahoma City, despite the dramatic nature which they lost last night's game in historic fashion? And what was going on with Nikola Jokic? He had one of his more uncharacteristically poor performances and potentially maybe fouled out on purpose. All things to come on today's rundown, but we begin in the NBA, where, as it aptly states on your screen right there, the Denver Nuggets got thunder punched by Oklahoma City in Game 2, losing by 43 points, one of the worst playoff losses in Nuggets history, and generally one of the worst, top 10 worst losses for the Nuggets in franchise history. Quite a reversal from the grit and resolve that we saw in Game 1, where the Nuggets were able to erase a double-digit fourth-quarter deficit halfway through the fourth quarter and steal Game 1 and home court advantage in the process against Oklahoma City. So I guess we kind of take things as they come, and I had a feeling that, and I said it here yesterday, I had said it to Cecil Lammy on the air earlier this week as well, that it felt like the Nuggets caught the Thunder with an uppercut in Game 1 that they weren't expecting. Oklahoma City had kind of played with their food in the series against Memphis, clearly the better, deeper, and more talented team, and wasn't ever really keeping their foot fully on the gas to coast through that series. Then they get 9 days of rest to maybe potentially rust up a little bit, and the Nuggets, who are coming off of less than 48 hours rest, come into Oklahoma City and pop them in the mouth, draw a little bit of blood, and catch them slipping a little bit. And my prognostication was, you're not going to get that 2 times in a row. You woke up the beast, and make no mistake, this Oklahoma City Thunder team is a beast. They won 68 games, one of less than 10 teams in NBA history to do so. And they were the runaway Secretariat-style leader of the Western Conference and of the NBA from a record perspective. And you weren't going to catch them slipping twice. And I fully expected Oklahoma City's effort and intensity and shot making to increase in waves from Game 1 to Game 2. What I didn't anticipate at the time of yesterday's show was the NBA picking up the bat phone and calling Scott Foster, dubbed the Extender, for his ability to officiate games in a way that helps the league extend series and bails top teams out of situations where a series or a game could get away from them against a plucky underdog kind of team. Because let's be real, a sweep, a gentleman's sweep of the top team in the West, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, or a polarizing team like the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic, who are former champions from just a couple of years ago, is not as good of an outcome for the NBA as a series that goes 6 or 7 games for either side. And Scott Foster has a pretty well documented reputation of doing this. That nickname doesn't just come out of thin air, the Extender. And once that report came out that he was being called up after missing multiple months with like a calf strain or a hamstring injury, which is crazy that we're having injury report updates for officials. But that should show you the fact that he hasn't even been officiating games because of an apparent injury to his lower body, but is called in an emergency situation to be the head official for this game. That was a message that was sent by the Denver Nuggets and thus received by the league without even factoring in Oklahoma City's response. And the result is a 40-plus point drubbing before the series heads back to Denver tomorrow night. So when we're looking at this game from a Nuggets perspective, I think there's a handful of things to diagnose. For one, they couldn't buy a bucket in the beginning of that game, especially in the first quarter. Oklahoma City scores 40-plus points in the first quarter, and Denver can't buy a bucket from beyond the arc, and they're not shooting that well overall. Jokic ends up finishing the game with as many turnovers as fouls and shots attempts, with 6 each. So quite a stark contrast from his 42, 22, and 6 game yesterday, and the, opportunity to put Aaron Gordon in a position where he can make a heroic three-pointer to win the game. So a pretty bad game from Jokic, who we had hoped would continue to capitalize on the defensive size mismatch against Chet Holmgren and even against Isaiah Hartenstein, because I felt like they were really pushing that on the broadcast the last couple of games. Not Hartenstein or Steen, it's Stein. I-Hart, as some might call him. And we didn't really get that. It was a very ineffective game for him. Michael Porter Jr., same old same. Not really doing enough for you there. Christian Brown as well. So there is an element to the catch-up effect from a rest perspective. And we talked about this going into game one, where they had such little rest from the end of the Clippers series to the beginning of the Thunder series. And eventually, even though it didn't impact him in game one, it could continue to impact him. And there was probably some residual effects of that after playing 40-plus minutes coming off of a 7-game series on the road into game one of a series. And maybe you got the reversal effect of that. So I guess I'll toss the question out to you. Obviously, nobody likes when the Nuggets lose, and definitely don't like when they lose in historic fashion, where SGA, the presumptive NBA MVP for the 2024-2025 season, has a historic playoff performance from a plus-minus perspective, finishing the game as a plus 51 when he finished in the double-digit negative category in game one, has now flipped it around a 60-point swing to go to plus 51 in game two. Clearly made a positive impact on the court for his team, more so than he did in the loss they suffered in game one. It was Jokic's first foul out, by the way. He fouled out in the third quarter. The first time he'd fouled out since game one of the 2023 postseason. So not something we typically see from Jokic, because in all honesty, superstars don't really foul out. And that's probably in part because they're superstars and they know how to manipulate things to avoid getting ticky-tack or unnecessary fouls. They position their bodies in specific ways and they can anticipate and read defenses. But also from an officiating perspective, I think superstars traditionally will get a little bit of a lax whistle. Jokic is like the antithesis of that. I do not think he gets a fair whistle compared to other NBA superstars, even less than his caliber, I would argue. And so it raised the question of whether or not potentially Nikola fouled out on purpose to sit the fourth quarter to get rest, because once he fouled out, they called off the dogs. Oklahoma City Stars didn't play in the fourth quarter. Denver was able to get a quarter worth of rest before heading into a series where they take it home on Friday, and they kind of packed up the tents a little bit. Nikola Jokic, after the game, basically admitted that only one team came to play. He said, quote, basically it was one team playing tonight. Even the turnover misses, they were aggressive. They were rebounding the ball. They were just better. They were much, much better than us today, and that's why the score was so bad. So Jokic clearly pointing at himself, along with the rest of his teammates from an effort perspective, that they just didn't bring that championship mettle and grit that they had in game one, that same mentality into game two, and you see the lopsided difference. And this is what it goes back to, the lack of a margin for error for the Denver Nuggets in this series, with how dangerous and explosively productive Oklahoma City can be and how stout and long they are on the defensive end of the court. The Nuggets can't have a bad night. They can rarely afford for one or two players to have a bad night, let alone the team as a whole have a bad night. And there was question about whether or not, because you could argue that this game had signs of being over after the first quarter and was probably, for all intents and purposes, over at halftime, which is hard to maybe say given how the ending of game one happened, where you were still down double digits halfway through the fourth quarter and you found a way to win. And they had kind of been down double digits for the entirety of that game. It was just in swings. It would go from 5 to 10, back to 7, up to 13, back to 6. And it was that yo-yo effect that the Nuggets just couldn't quite ever bring it back to level until the final minute or so of the game. But David Adelman, the interim head coach of the Nuggets, was not interested in potentially over-resting and kind of insinuated that that's not how they do business. He said, quote, "We got punked and we didn't play well enough, and they came out with the right intensity and we didn't. I thought we left some open shots early in the game, and that affected how we played defensively." So He went on to say that he was not planning on pulling the starters at halftime because that's not how we're going to do things around here. That's a direct quote, by the way. That's not how we're going to do things. And I appreciated maybe him taking a little bit of ownership from that perspective, because let's be honest, this is a guy who, after beating the series against the Clippers, put himself in a prime position as an internal candidate to be the next head coach of the Denver Nuggets. And we can argue back and forth about whether or not that's the right decision to make, and factor in other options that are available. But the bottom line is, whoever is chosen to be the figurehead of the Denver Nuggets on their bench, and calling the shots, along with the new GM that comes in, maybe in an even more important capacity, it has to be a pick that is made with the mindset of maximizing the years that we have left of Nikola Jokic's prime in a Denver Nuggets uniform, because they may never, and odds are they will never, have another player of Nikola Jokic's caliber with the unique and dynamic skill set that he has. And so, from a perspective, if you're trying to look at it at a macro level, could you say that if you had said before the series that they were going to split the first two games in Oklahoma City, steal home court advantage, and have a chance to go up 3-1 if they hold serve at home, and that be like a positive, well-received outcome? Yeah, sure. I think so. But man, I don't love losing by that much. And you can say, hey, after game 2, you move the series back to Denver. It's a clean slate. It's basically a best-of-5 series at that point because they're tied 1-1. And while their odds did go up dramatically by being able to steal game 1 in terms of winning the series, losing by that much does feel like it's not easy to just brush off. That is an ass whooping, okay? And it's going to sting for longer than just 24 hours. And I know David Adelman talked about flushing it away and moving on, kind of the "we're on to Cincinnati" Bill Belichick motto of moving forward to game 3 and doing the best that we can. And I think that not playing, Jokic fouling out and the starters really not playing in the fourth quarter, allowed for some rest and a mental gear up and a reset in order to get ready for this homestand that will probably decide the Nuggets' fate in the series, or very well could, depending on how it shakes out. But let's not forget, the Nuggets had a moment like this last postseason in the Minnesota series, where the Minnesota Timberwolves absolutely ran them off the floor by 45 points. So the only postseason loss worse than what the Nuggets just suffered last night came last season against Minnesota. And we had that famous sequence where Nikola Jokic is standing on the baseline off the court after being pulled from the game. And he is just stone-faced and angry and solemn, and basically like having the Derek Carr, the Tom Brady eyes of, I am never going to let something like this happen to me again. And then what they do in game 7 right after that, they gave up a 20-point lead on their home court and got bounced on their home floor in a game 7 in pretty epic and embarrassing fashion. So I don't necessarily have the confidence that this is just a flush it away, easily move on and turn the chapter kind of game. And I will be very, very aware and hyper-focused on how the Nuggets come out tomorrow night and approach this, because like I said, I think it will have a pretty dramatic impact on swinging the momentum in this series. When it comes to the Denver Broncos, the offseason programming, voluntary workouts, and OTAs are getting going this weekend on Saturday. Our guys Cecil Lammy and Andrew Mason will be on the scene covering it all. And we're already getting some trickle-outs about projections and speculation around Bo Nix and how he will look in his sophomore season after kind of sneaking up on the collective NFL world in his rookie year, where he was the 6th quarterback taken off the board, was given the least amount of hype, and the reports early on are teams had a 2nd or 3rd round grade on him, and Sean Payton grossly overreached, and yada, yada, yada. Well, after about a 3 to 4 week stretch of some pretty awful football where Bo was clearly drinking through a fire hose to try to understand Sean Payton's offense, things turned around pretty quickly. And then he became a bona fide Rookie of the Year candidate and was kind of going toe-to-toe with Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders from a quarterback-to-quarterback perspective for that award. And he looked like one of the best quarterbacks in football. He finishes 12th in the NFL last season in terms of passing yards. He had 29 touchdowns, which was second only to Justin Herbert, who eclipsed the 30 mark in terms of touchdown passes by a rookie. And he finished with 12 interceptions alongside those 29 touchdown passes, which 4 of which came in the first month or so of the season when he was playing poorly. So the touchdown to interception ratio from week 5 to the postseason, significantly better than what the aggregate is for the entire season. Well, Mike Clay, an NFL analyst for ESPN, a well-respected member of the scouting football fantasy community, he is now working for ESPN, and he put out some projections for Bo Nix in 2025. So I've put them side by side here with his 2024 totals and 2025 totals. In 2024, Bo Nix passed for just under 3,800 yards, 29 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, as I mentioned, and a 66.3% completion percentage. Mike Clay, who does these projections for all kinds of players, it's a massive, massive undertaking in the NFL for Mike Clay, has Bo Nix passing for about, 400 yards less or so, 5 less touchdowns, and only 1 less interception. But he's maintaining the same completion percentage at 66.3%. So my next question to you is, does that constitute potentially a sophomore slump? And would you be satisfied with that production? Now, there's obviously context to all of these things, because if Bo Nix is operating in an offense with RJ Harvey that is more balanced in the run game, that probably constitutes less of a need to throw the ball. There was a handful of times in Bo Nix's first month as an NFL starter where he threw for 50 passing attempts in a game, which is not a recipe for success by and large for a young signal caller. Mike Clay has him throwing for 70 less pass attempts on average. That's his projection from last year to this year. He also has him running the ball less. Bo Nix carried the ball 92 times last season, some of which, a significant amount of which I should say were not designed, all the way down to 75 rushing attempts, so about a 20% decrease there. And also has him taking about 27% more sacks behind this Broncos offensive line from 27 up to 33. I think that these projections from Mike Clay are a little bit of a safe gamble in a sense that Bo Nix kind of outpaced so many people's projections as a rookie that it's easier to predict a little bit of a dip and a decline. It's not drastic, I would say, by most statistical metrics, but it is a little bit surprising when you consider that Bo Nix did what he did in his rookie season with almost no supporting cast outside of Cortland Sutton and no real running game from Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Audric Estime. So you're going into an offseason where, yes, they added RJ Harvey, and a complementary run game could eliminate the need to pass the ball as frequently as they do. But you're also adding an additional take-a-step year for Marvin Mims. Hopefully, maybe more development from a Devon Vele and a Troy Franklin. You drafted Pat Bryant out of Illinois, who, as Cecil Lammy and I talked about yesterday, is probably going to surprise a lot of people from a 50-50 ball and a body catch radius standpoint of how well he can produce in this offense and be a weapon for Bo Nix. You added Evan Ingram as your crown jewel on the offensive side of the football in free agency to be your Joker type role, and Marvin Mims doesn't have to play that part by force anymore, and he can operate on the outside where his speed and elusiveness can be a little bit more of an advantage. So if you were watching Bo Nix last season do all of the things he did with significantly less, why would you predict a decline by 5 touchdown passes and 400 yards without a decline in efficiency from an interception standpoint in 2025? And let's not forget, yes, RJ Harvey is hopefully going to be the new face of the Broncos running back room, the product out of UCF that they traded back multiple times in the second round to select. But the second leading receiver in terms of receptions on the Denver Broncos last season was Javonte Williams. So Sean Payton loves himself some screen game, which in theory would contribute to Bo Nix's passing statistics. So yes, RJ Harvey from a running perspective might make the offense a little more balanced, but I fully expect Sean Payton wants to include RJ Harvey as a prominent piece of his receiving or of his passing offense if RJ Harvey is up to the task. So I'm a little bit confused, and I think it's a little bit of a sandbag or a safe prediction from Mike Clay. But my prediction for Bo Nix, just by watching him with open eyes and having a full offseason where he can continue to grow and develop chemistry with these new weapons and ingratiate himself even deeper with Sean, and probably factoring in that he's not going to have as rough of a 4-game start to the season as he did as a rookie, and you're going to get more production out of those games. I don't think it's crazy that Bo Nix's passing yards total starts with a 4. And if it's a 3, it's 3,900 yards. And I think he creeps closer to 30 than 25 for sure, going off of Mike Clay's touchdown projections. So I don't know. My question, I guess, to you would be, would you be okay with Bo Nix having a statistical regression in year 2? And would that concern you about a potential sophomore slump? One thing I know for sure is that we are going to find out very soon how this new look Broncos offense and team, with the defensive additions of Jahdae Barron, Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, and the like, how they are going to coalesce together as off-season workouts begin this Saturday. And then once that chapter arrives, we are just weeks away from mandatory mini camp, and then training camp will be here where we'll be able to be on site with our eyes on the product and see what the ceiling and expectation should be for a Broncos team that just came off of their first winning season since 2016 and their first postseason appearance since they won the Super Bowl. So many exciting things to come. We will have another opportunity to watch Mikko Rantanen probably score a 3rd hat trick for the Dallas Stars in the postseason as they dispatch Winnipeg in Game 1. And the Denver Nuggets will get things going back at Ball Arena, coming back to their home court to try to put the momentum back in their favor and push Oklahoma City to a deeper and deeper series to see who emerges as the finalist in the Western Conference. Thank you all so much for joining me, and we will catch you again tomorrow.